Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our online session. I'm delighted to introduce to you today the distinguished academic and leader, Dr. Hema Doreswamy. Dr. Doreswamy is a renowned expert in the field of finance with particular focus on corporate governance and responsible management education. Dr. Hema Doreswamy is an accomplished finance professor with 18 years of experience in teaching and research. Dr. Hema Doreswamy holds a PhD in finance and published 18 research papers in reputed journals, along with presenting numerous national and international conferences. In her professional tenure, she has worked with the prestigious institute like Welingkar Institute of Management and Indus Business Academy. Dr. Doreswamy has also led.
You can see me, sir? Oh, I see.
Dr. Doreswamy also led corporate training programs for companies like Infosys, E&Y, and Robert Bosch. Beyond the academic, she has contributed to institutional development and spearheading the finance specialization and mentoring the student in research and entrepreneurship. Her research and interest includes corporate governance and responsible management education, and she has been a principal investigator for AICTE funded projects, making significant contribution to the field of finance and business education. Welcome to you, ma'am.
On behalf of CES, we welcome you, ma'am. Ma'am, the session is over to you.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. So, namaste to everyone. Good evening and warm welcome to the session. First and foremost, a very happy Navaratri to all of you. And I thank CES for giving me this opportunity to deliver a session on Indian models on corporate governance. As sir mentioned in the introduction, my area is accounting and finance. I'm a professor at Welingkar Institute of Management. I teach in the area of accounting and finance, and my PhD is on the topic of corporate governance. So the topic for the day, which is Indian model of corporate governance, my PhD is also on the similar area. I have studied the existing corporate governance model, that is the ESG model of corporate governance, and I have added an Indian perspective, that is the ethical perspective in my study, and I have developed a new model of corporate governance. So that was my thesis. Post my PhD too, these are some of my topics which I do research on a regular basis. Governance, ethics, sustainability, corporate performance, and corporate governance. So these are my area of research. So I'll just share my slides and start with the session. So let's start with the session. The topic that I will be discussing is corporate governance models, an Indian perspective. So the agenda for the session goes like, as I have mentioned here. Firstly, I'll spend a couple of minutes in explaining what exactly is this concept of corporate governance. What are the, in a global platform, accepted principles of corporate governance, the importance of corporates in an economy, because we keep reading a lot of content and a lot of regulatory components, a lot of changes and committees, etc., related to corporate governance on a regular basis. So let's try and understand why it is so important. What is the role these corporates, big corporates, large business organizations play in an economy? Primarily, all of us understand that this concept of corporate governance is important to ensure that these large organizations run in an effective manner for a long period of time without getting involved in any kind of scams or fraudulent transactions or economic meltdown, etc. So what happens when these kind of corporate scams happen? How do they impact? Do they impact just the company or the entire economy as such? And then we will move on to Indian model of corporate governance. And I have included a small case, that is Tata. As all of us know very well, whenever it comes to corporate governance or responsible business or contribution towards the society, the one corporate that stands out or one company that comes to our mind is Tata. So we will go ahead and see how they have incorporated this trusteeship model of governance, which is based on Indian principles. And then the closing thoughts, and then I'll keep the session open for questions. So first and foremost, what is corporate governance? All of us understand the generic meaning of the term governance, right? So whenever these election seasons approach and whenever political parties bring up their agenda, whenever they campaign, they always use this term good governance, right? So that is what we expect from the government. All of us want a good governance. So in a public sphere, what exactly good governance indicates? It could be good infrastructure, it is good availability of various kinds of facilities, be it education, be it healthcare, be it availability of resources, availability of jobs, maintenance of law and order. So when a society is smoothly functioning without any kind of hiccups or without any bottlenecks, we generally call it good governance, right? When it provides equal opportunity to all, when the society is progressing, when there is opportunities for growth, when the economy is doing well, when the law and order is good. Now, all these components, we call it governance. That is from a country perspective, that is from a society perspective. Similarly, the term corporate governance indicates the same, but with reference to a business organization. Now, what is the difference between a business organization and a society? See, in case of society, we don't look for creating profits, right? The job of a government is to run a society in a smooth manner. Of course, money is important to government. Government also earns money through various sources like your taxes, dividends, etc. But there, the major objective of the government is to ensure the seamless functioning of the society. But in case of a corporate, the moment we add the term corporate, the concept of profit comes into picture. Now, see, whenever you register a business under Companies Act, right, you are a profit-making entity. You may not be a profit-making entity as soon as you register, but definitely you are an entity who are looking forward to create wealth, to make profit, to make business, to sell products, and to sell services, right? That is where your existence is. Now, it is not wrong to say that these companies exist to make profit, because profit is not a dirty word. Profit is very, very important. Creating wealth is very, very important. But the means through which you create profits, the means through which you create wealth, the means through which you make business, right? You do business is very, very important. So this concept of corporate governance exists to ensure there is a framework to run these companies on certain set of rules, regulations, principles by following certain norms, right? So if you look at the meaning, it says corporate governance is a system of rules, practices, and processes that control and direct a company's operations. So as I said, it is a framework. There are a lot of rules here. There are certain practices. There are a lot of control mechanisms. Most of you might have heard about these concepts of internal control, internal audit, audit practices, board meetings, whistleblower policy. Now, these are all different control mechanisms just to ensure some checks and balances. So this corporate governance, it includes a relationship between a company and its stakeholders. Now, in accounting, those who are not from this background, just to make it very simple, when we in accounting, we have a concept called as separate entity concept. Now, what does this separate entity concept indicates? It indicates that the person who starts the business and the business are two different entities. What does that mean? That means company is an artificial person, right? It has its own existence. So it is a entity. Even when you talk about filing taxes, company is an assessee. Company itself is an assessee. As you have individual, company is also an assessee. So which means there is a relationship between a company and its various stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders? There are few important stakeholders that are mentioned here. This is not exhaustive. There are many other stakeholders, say shareholders, there are management, employees, customers, suppliers, community. There are lenders, bankers, right? The government itself is a stakeholder. So there could be many stakeholders. So anybody who has some kind of interest with the business is a stakeholder. Now, what are some of these principles of corporate governance? Corporate governance principles always advocate, right? Fair accounting, responsibility, and now since 2 to 3 decades, this concept of sustainability is also added. Now, if you see Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, popularly called as OECD, so they are the pioneers to come up with these principles of corporate governance. So recently they added this concept of sustainability and resilience because, as all of us know very well, global warming and climate change is a challenge which everybody is facing, which is having very severe outcomes in the form of a lot of climate disasters, and it is creating a lot of trouble for each and everybody on planet Earth. So it has to be addressed. Now, who are the people who has to contribute maximum towards it? Whenever we talk about this global warming as a problem, we always say pre-industry era and post-industry era. So that is how the comparison is being made, is pre-industry and post-industry, which means the major contributors for this burning issue of climate change is to a large extent it's the industry. Now, who emit a lot of greenhouse gases? It's obviously the corporates, right? So therefore, this sustainability has become a part and parcel of corporate governance component for each and every organization. So no wonder it has been included as one of the very important principles. Now, these are some of the important principles that OECD recommends. So there has to be basis for an effective corporate governance framework. You should treat each and every shareholder equally, because when you say shareholder, there could be majority shareholders and there could be minority shareholders. There could be institutional shareholders, there could be foreign shareholders, there could be domestic shareholders. So there could be various kinds of shareholders. You need to treat each one of them equally. Just because somebody has only 10 shares, somebody else has 1 million shares, the treatment cannot be different, right? Institutional investors, stock markets, and other intermediaries' contribution need to be recognized. Disclosure and transparency, responsibility of the board. Now, these are the two very important aspects of corporate governance. Disclosure, and disclosure. Transparency. Now, even if we pick annual reports of companies, they run into 200, 300 pages where they are expected to disclose each and every component of their business. So disclosure and transparency are the two building blocks of good governance. The responsibilities of the board, as all of us know, it's the board who will take key decisions, be it mergers, acquisitions, be it expansion of the business, be it introduction of the new product, be it new patents filing, or be it increase in salaries to key members of the company. So all key decisions are taken by the board, and the responsibilities of the board is very important, and they have to take it seriously. Now, whenever there is a corporate scam, most of us might have observed that in the newspapers, they will say, what were the board doing? What were the independent directors doing? So from that perspective, it is important to realize that the responsibility of the board plays a very important role in keeping the sanctity of this corporate governance. And lastly, as I mentioned, sustainability, which is part and parcel of the entire governance system today. So if you have to understand in a nutshell, today, when you say corporate governance, it is a combination of making profits, contribution towards the society, and also contribution towards planet Earth. So all these things done on a transparent manner. How you're doing it has to be disclosed properly, treating all stakeholders equally. Now, these are some of the components of corporate governance. Now, when it comes to models, now what exactly these models of governance? Now, see, each society is different. Each society comes with its own socio-economic conditions. Each country comes with its own belief systems. So hence, we can't expect that every country follows the same corporate governance model. And hence, different countries follow different methods of models of corporate governance. Now, I'm discussing majorly 3 models here. There are many other models as well, but across the globe, if you see, many countries adopt any one of these models, of course, with a little bit of tweaking according to their own requirement. Now, if you see the first one, that is Anglo-Saxon model, or it is also very popularly called as Anglo-American model. This is a model which Indian companies too adopt, but of course with little bit of changes, rules and regulations here and there. The essence of this model is what? The separation of ownership and the management. So this model believes that people who have invested money, they'll stay as owners. It's called as principal agent relationship. So who are the principals? Shareholders are the principals. Agent is the manager. That means shareholders appoint managers, and these managers run the business on a day-to-day basis. They expand the business, they create profits, they create wealth, and they are in charge of the business. So that is Anglo-American model. Now, what is the essence of this model? The essence of this model is, if the person who is investing money himself manages the business, he may not have required skills. So what is he supposed to do? He is supposed to appoint an intelligent person, appoint a person who has business acumen to run the business. So which means manager is in charge of running the business. He takes the responsibility of expansion of the business. He takes responsibility of creating wealth, and he becomes also answerable to the progress of the business. So that is Anglo-Saxon model. Now, when you come to European model, there is very popularly known as German model. In case of this model, one of the very important, since due to the paucity of time, I'll not be spending too much of time in explaining, which is like there could be many points and characters, but let's just understand the essence of each of these models. So in case of the continental European model, or specifically what German model follows, in this, the board, I was telling you, like the board of directors, there are 2 different levels of boards. One is called as supervisory board and one is called as the management board. So management board basically comprises of managers, but a supervisory board comprises of shareholders. And another important characteristic of German model is it also involves employees on the board. This could be very what to say, few people may like it, few people may not like it, because we know that when employees are on the board, they have more bargaining power, right? The way you think as an employee and the way you think as an owner are 2 different things, but that's how this German model is all about. It is characterized by, as it mentioned here, major shareholder interest, because management board is, there is somebody sitting above the management board, they're observing what you're doing. So which means the managers' freedom is not as much as you can see in the Anglo-Saxon model. Then Japanese model, It is a very, very control specific model where there is a particular bank which controls most of your operations. That most of these Japanese model, they have a major banker. It's a group of banks called as Keiretsu, where each company must have a major banker. The banker controls most of the decisions these companies take. So these are some of the important models that are available across the globe. Now, as I was mentioning, from an Indian perspective, most of you know that we also follow this Anglo-American model where there is shareholders and there are managers. These managers manage the business on a day-to-day basis. But one important component we need to remember is, from an Indian perspective, there are many, many family conglomerates, right? So what happens in these family conglomerates is managers most of the time for family conglomerates come from the family itself, which means these managers are not outsiders, but these managers are also from the family. So you cannot actually differentiate that much between the difference between principal and agent relationship, because the principal and the agent are in most cases of family managed business is from the family itself. So that is the reason I was telling we need to tweak a little bit when we are adopting this corporate governance model. Now, let's quickly move on to what is the importance of these governance mechanisms in large organizations. So as I was mentioning before, why do we talk so much about corporate governance? Now, I just want all of you to have a look at the money at stake in these large organizations. So I've just put two statistics, one from Fortune 500 companies, and the next slide shows you the worth of top 10 Indian companies by market cap. If you see here, the Fortune 500 companies represent 2/3 of the US GDP with 18.8 trillion in revenue and 1.7 trillion in profits and 43 trillion in market value. This is the recent data, that's March 28, 2024, and they employ around 31 million people worldwide. So that means these Fortune 500 companies, they're not just restricted to one location. Their impact is spread over across the globe. They in fact employ 31 million people. That means just imagine the kind of impact these large organizations are having in their own countries as well as throughout the world. Look at those numbers. Now, if you see from an Indian perspective, now these are the top 10 Indian companies with the highest market cap. So number one is Reliance. Now, what is the money we are talking about here? It's around 18,76,251.26. Now, this is crores. The money is in crores, INR crores, right? So this is the kind of money that is involved in these companies. Now, so why am I showing you this data? Why I'm showing this data is just to put a point that how important these large corporates from the perspective of an economy. What does these companies do to an economy? Firstly, as we saw here, how many jobs they have created, right? So they do create a lot of jobs. These companies come up with so many new products and services, which makes our lives very easy, right? I mean, just imagine around 100 years ago how the life was and how the life is today. So it is very common. Many philosophers or many motivational speakers, they make this point that we are living in the most exciting times and we are having a much sorted out and easy life compared to the older generations, because we have so many new services available, so many new products available. There is so much of improvement in all different spheres of life, be it education, be it medical services, be it transportation, be it infrastructure, be it availability of a lot of gadgets. And now just take, for example, how simple life has become in the kitchen. So we have so many new products and services which makes the job of entire cooking so easy. So this is all an outcome of new products and services which people think of and bring it to reality. So these companies do a significant contribution to GDPs of the country. Just now we saw Fortune 500 companies hold almost 2/3 of the richest country in the world. So that is the kind of contribution they make. So they also create revenue to the government through taxes. It encourages innovation and new ideas. As I was mentioning, people think about a new challenge that somebody is facing. They create product or services and they bring it to the market. Lastly, these companies also help in poverty reduction and other social welfare activities through their CSR initiatives. Now, when the companies are having all of this, right, when they are such rich companies, and when they hold so much of value, when there is so much of good things that they are doing, imagine these companies getting into corporate scams. Now just read this. Many of you may be aware of this Volkswagen scam. This didn't happen, say 20 years ago. It happened in the year 2015. So what was it? Let's not go deep into the scam because it's already 6 o'clock. I would need another 15-20 minutes to still finish my slides. So basically it was Volkswagen did something where their carbon emission was not detected properly. So there was some kind of device that they were having in the car which manipulated their carbon emission because carbon emission norms suddenly became very, very stringent. And they, as you can see, a specific type of a software and around 11 million of its diesel powered cars. So ultimately, they were caught in the year 2015. So what happened when they were caught? So they were supposed to recall 4,80,000 vehicles, which is a huge economic loss. And they paid around $25 billion in fine. CEO Martin, he has to resign, right? It faced a lot of financial burdens and it also faced a lot of litigation risk. Many employees lost their jobs. Volkswagen came down in the rank of brand equity. Now, all these things happened, which is a huge economic loss to the company. At least this company did not collapse totally. But if you go back and see companies like Enron, which was awarded the most innovative company, or waste management company, or there was a credit card company in Germany, I'm not able to recall the name, so that company, or in India, Satyam, right? These companies, Satyam was not completely collapsed because it was taken over by Tech Mahindra and somehow it was managed. But otherwise, just imagine if there was no government intervention those days, if there was no interim board, we don't know what could have happened because there were around 40,000 employees. So the impact of corporate governance scams is very, very costly and very, very huge for an economy. Now, what all happens whenever there's a corporate governance scam? There could be collapse or total bankruptcy of the firm. There is loss of employment, erosion of wealth for investors. Now, if you see all these companies, before the scam is hit, the share prices will be like $70, $80. Suddenly, when a scam hits, they'll come down to $1 or some cents, and they go out of the market. Which means it is an erosion of wealth for the investors, for lenders. If you have lent money and you're a bankrupt company, so you face a loss as a bank or as a financial institution. Now, a business, as we discussed in the first slide, you have a lot of stakeholders, right? You have suppliers, you have customers, you have distributors, you have a lot of people who are giving you services. So there are n number of stakeholders who are also doing business because of you. We say, right, supplementary and complementary industries, right? So it is a chain. So one industry starts, there are 10 people who are also getting some business because of you. So there is loss of business for everyone the moment you go down. Loss of reputation, hefty penalties and tough legal consequences. So this is all from the company and stakeholder perspective. Imagine it is a huge loss to a nation as well. Now see, any country for that matter, we know very well that government cannot provide jobs to everyone, right? It's the corporate entities who pitch in and create jobs in any nation for that matter. They take a huge burden and they play a vital role in creating jobs, employment, wealth to a country. Now, a loss of a long-term wealth creating entity will come with loss of reputation and also potential investors. And it is a kind of a black spot for the entire country as such. Oh, okay, this company belongs to this country. So what is the regulatory mechanism in this country? What's the history of corporates? So it actually brings in a kind of attention in a negative way whenever a scam breaks out in a country. Now, so that is the reason this concept of corporate governance is very, very important. And it's important to ensure that these large organizations work in a systematic way, they work effectively, they work efficiently, and they stay without any controversies or financial manipulations or any other kind of manipulations. Now, all of us know corporate governance is also a very huge regulatory driven component. The moment you say corporate governance, if you see clause 49 or if you see SEBI guidelines, it is heavily compliance driven. Same with Security Exchange Commission in the US. After Enron scam, they brought in SOX, right? So here, from an Indian perspective, every time we have new committees being appointed, be it Kotak committee or Narayan Murthy committee, so they do a study and they come up with new initiatives. Or say, for example, making the New Companies Act also came up with a lot of new changes to the corporate governance system, be it every company must have its own vigilance mechanism, or be it making the women director mandatory. So there are so many rules and regulations. There are specific guidelines for board meetings. There are specific guidelines for appointment of independent director. There are specific guidelines for executive remuneration. There are specific guidelines for auditing. Now, irrespective of all of this, across the globe, there are frequent corporate scams which will be coming to light every now and then, posing a very, very tough challenge to the regulator. So what more can be done, right? Now you're making them do everything, but somehow these scams again and again keeps coming back, right? So capital market regulators across the globe have significantly increased compliance and disclosure. If you see, if you pick up any annual report and go to the section of corporate governance, it is really very, very intense and very, very lengthy disclosures that they have to do. So irrespective of increased compliance, rules, regulations, and compliance norm, these corporate scams are very, very common, which makes us think that there is something fundamentally that should change, and only making more and more compliance and rules and regulations may not serve the purpose. That's wherein I will introduce this concept of Indian model of governance. Before that, there are certain unique characteristics of Indian society and Indian companies as well, because I strongly believe that any business is reflection of a particular society. How a society is, businesses are also done, because it's the stakeholders come from the society, right? So if you see an Indian society, for that matter, service to the society is the most important aspect in Indian society since ancient times, right? Whether it is, as I have stated, the second and third point, if you see, Chanakya, a great statesman and sage, whose teachings and whose theories are relevant even today in the area of business, welfare economics, conflict resolution, etc. So believed in serving society by prioritizing the wealth of the people and ensuring that the kingdom was secure. So if you see, one of the greatest statesmen of our times, so he propagated the idea of welfare of the people is important, because collectively if we prosper, we are going to go a very, very long way. So it is important to put a collective welfare above everything else than prioritizing our individual success or individual priorities. And we also know that the entire Indian kingdoms, right, the ancient kingdoms, everybody followed this concept of Rajadharma. What exactly is Rajadharma? Again, welfare and happiness of the subjects, maintain law and order, uphold justice, and protect the weak and vulnerable, right? So these were some of the important principles on which society was running. So everybody had this concept of serving the society, addressing the needs of weak and vulnerable, maintaining law and order, and ensuring that the people of the country are happy, or people of the kingdom are happy. So these were the principles through which the kingdoms were run. It is very common to read in our ancient scriptures all these principles, be it Ramayana, Mahabharata. So hundreds of stories even today we share with our next generation, making it as a foundation for the kind of belief system that our country still holds good, right? So even at our homes, even if you recall our parents, they would always tell us, or even today we tell our kids that ensure that you're doing some kind of a service, ensure that you're not very, very self-centered. So these are some of the things that we generally teach our kids, or the teachings that we got from our parents as well. So putting social welfare and social justice above individual success and glory was a very, very common phenomenon. So businesses are a reflection of society, and hence many features of Indian society can be seen in Indian companies as well. Now, as all of us know, I was mentioning that the unique feature of Indian companies is that they are family conglomerates. Now that we are seeing a lot of these startups coming up, right? So many of these are new businesses coming up, which is a very, very welcoming trend. But otherwise, we had very old companies, be it Tatas, Birlas. So there are so many Aditya Birla Group, Mahindra and Mahindra. Now these are all the family conglomerates, right? So many of these businesses were running from hundreds of years before even businesses became this sophisticated, and before it was viewed as a proper functional area. Say the post-industrialization, the Western economies, there were a lot of churning happening, a lot of brainstorming happened, and they brought in this new concept of how to run the business, profit maximization, wealth maximization, etc., etc. But even before that, some of these Indian companies were doing a business. They believed in the concept. So the CSR, if you actually look at CSR, corporate social responsibility, this was born out of compulsion. If we read the history of business ethics, or if we read the history of corporate social responsibility, it came much, much later in the timeline of industry revolution, right? When all these big businesses started amassing wealth, I'm talking from the Western economies perspective, when they started amassing wealth, when too much of money was there in some of these individual companies, and when communication channels opened, like say, be it a radio or television, So they were started being questioned, saying that, okay, you're making so much money for yourself. What are you doing for the society? Because you are a part of society. So that's when this concept of CSR came into picture. So when a lot of questions being asked about accumulation of wealth by these individual business houses, that's when the concept of this CSR came into picture, and a fancy word like corporate social responsibility came into picture. But if you see Indian businesses, they were doing this corporate social responsibility, giving back to the society from much, much before these concepts became mainstream. It is very common to see these old business houses being involved in adopting villages or providing food or contribution towards education or taking care of a girl child. So there were many are providing scholarships, free education, opening schools. So all these things were being done by these Indian companies even before the introduction of these concepts. And also, I would also like to add this concept of sustainability. Now, if you see sustainability, it has been a word which has become a fancy word throughout the world today. People are talking about protecting the environment or reducing carbon emission, etc., etc. But if you see our history, right, we always propagated coexistence with the nature, right? We always respected existing peaceful existence with the nature, be it worshipping trees, be it worshipping sun, be it protecting forests, or be it planting trees. These are all the concepts that is there in our value system from ancient times. So whatever we had once upon a time, and which is a part and parcel of our society, it has been realized later by others, and that has been becoming mainstream, right? So what we have from an Indian perspective or from an Indian corporate governance model is trusteeship. So this model is very popularly known as trusteeship. It is a socio-economic philosophy that is closely related to social responsibility of a business. So according to the concept of trusteeship, all business firms must work like a trust. So what do you mean by trust? Trust means it is somebody else's money. I'm just protecting it. It doesn't belong to me. So this philosophy was propounded by Mahatma Gandhi ji as well. He gave a very passionate call to all Indian companies to adopt this model of governance. So this is the due to the paucity of time, I'll just go a little faster. So this is the trusteeship model where you can just read quickly. Independent entity different from its members, has its assets, rights, duties, will and capacity to act, and the manager should act as trustees whose fiduciary duty is to uphold the firm's assets and comprising the shareholders' wealth, expectation of government. So basically it says that even companies should work as a trust. Now, when companies or managers treat companies as a trust, what happens? Obviously, you act with a little more responsibility. You don't see that money as yours. You don't become greedy. You don't want to say manipulate a bit of that amount for yourself because you are discharging your fiduciary duties. Now let's see Tata Group as a trusteeship structure, because as I mentioned in the beginning itself, one of the main Indian company that comes to our mind when we talk about ethics or responsible business, etc., is Tata, and it truly adopts a trusteeship structure. Now, see, let us look at some of these highlights. So, charitable trust owns around 66% of Tata Sons, while the founding Tata family are a very small minority shareholder, which means it's actually a trust. The trustees' governance role is limited to nominating 2 members to the selection committee, which recommends the chairman of the board of directors. That means just because 66% of the shares are held by the trust, they don't get involved in day-to-day activities. They keep themselves away from the day-to-day activities. Tata Motors has policies in place to document guidelines for different areas. So their policies are very well made. Ethics. So Tata Group emphasizes ethics, integrity, and accountability. The Tata Code of Conduct outlines the ethical practices and desired behaviors of Tata companies and employees. So you take any Tata company for that matter and see their code of conduct or whistleblower policy or anti-corruption rules, etc. They are very, very well explained, and there are severe consequences if there are any compromises. So with regards to social responsibility, as I was mentioning, this is one of the biggest group which contributes maximum to the social responsibility area and as well as to the sustainability area. Board meetings, see, some of these are mandatory. Say, for example, board meeting details, it has to be conducted every quarter. These are all mandatory requirements, which of course Tata Group is following on a regular basis. So now I will share these slides with the institute. Probably they will share it with all of you. I want all of you to read this story. That is the founding story of Tata Steel Jamshedpur. It is going to be 100 years of starting the building of this Jamshedpur. How it is not just a factory that was built in Jamshedpur, but one whole area was developed. The kind of facilities they have now, the kind of business they create, the kind of life that has been given to people there. It is an amazing story. Now it's just a corporate entity, but the kind of contribution that have been done by this organization by following our own Indian model of governance, that is the trusteeship model of governance, it is an impeccable story, and I request all of you to go through this. So lastly, there is something called as compassionate capitalism, which is need of the hour. So whatever said and done, all of us should remember and acknowledge the fact that capitalism is the way forward, because socialism has not given good kind of results in any part of the world for that matter. The countries which stuck to socialism have their own issues and challenges. So capitalism is needed for the world to move forward. Capitalism is nothing but giving equal opportunity to private players and giving them freedom to do the business. Now, if you see India, till 1991, we were a closed economy. Then we opened up with certain guidelines and control from the government, and we have seen the results. But then a kind of extreme capitalism is also not good, because we keep reading in newspapers how there is accumulation of wealth in few hands, richer become richer and poorer go poorer. So these are some of the consequences of extreme capitalism. There is something called as compassionate capitalism, which our Narayan Murthy, the co-founder and former CEO of Infosys Technologies, also very, very passionately proponent. So what exactly is this compassionate capitalism? It can be defined as equal access for all to unlimited economic growth opportunities. So which will, of course, ensure equal distribution of wealth. Now that is a major problem the world is facing. There is wealth across the globe, but this wealth is being concentrated in few hands, which is one very unfortunate outcome of extreme capitalism, which need to be addressed through this concept of compassionate capitalism. So this concept is something that has been advocated time and again, even in our ancient scriptures as well. So closing thoughts. So corporate governance, it's an important function to run business organizations effectively and efficiently. It is needed, and it's an important element. So there is no one fit for all model available, as each country and company have their own unique social and economic attributes. So as I was mentioning, if you see the way West functions, if you see the way entire Europe region functions, if you see the way US functions, if you see the way Asian countries function, if you see the way China functions, if you see the way some of these countries in the Middle East function, they all are different. So we cannot have one fit for all model. Models should be taken and tweaked according to their own requirement. But having said that, the concepts of service to the society, transparency, disclosure, running a business ethically, fulfilling fiduciary duties, and working towards sustainable business operations is key. So whatever model you take, these elements has to be incorporated. These concepts have been part and parcel of every aspect of Indian society since our ancient times. This model of corporate governance needs to be propagated in the global platforms, because as I was telling you, many people don't know that these are things that are existing. As I was mentioning, whether it is the kind of sustainability aspects that we have, or whether it is the kind of long-lasting impact that can be created through having this trusteeship model as a governance mechanism. There is a huge body of knowledge which could be useful to the world, which we need to propagate, which we need to talk more on global platforms, which we need to do more research, do a lot of publications, and draw attention so that the world benefits because of this ancient useful thoughts that our history has. So with this, I'll close my talk and I'm open to questions.
Oh, thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful session on taking us through about what is corporate governance, where everybody could understand, even from a different background, they could understand what corporate governance is, what are the various principles which are there, the various Western models, and how we try to navigate with the Indian models which are going to be. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now we'll take a few questions. Can we take the questions now, ma'am?
Yes.
The first question is, what causes these failures and bankruptcy of one-time great companies known for consistency on performance year after year?
So as I was mentioning before, majority of the companies follow this principal agent relationship model, that is Anglo-American model. So in Anglo-American model, the major problem is these managers are just the employees. What you have to remember is managers are just the employees. So today they are with this company, tomorrow they may go to some other company. One major reason for these scams is their pay packages are related to their performance, which means you get $1 million revenue, you're paid 10% commission as a variable pay. So now they get carried away by these numbers, because see, it is very easy to say that not everything is money. In most cases, money is something that everybody wants to earn. Money is something that motivates people. We can't, especially when you are in those CXO roles, it's money, success, and getting good business. These are the things that rise. So they take these unfair measures sometimes for their individual achievements, for keeping those money intact, and to show that they are successful. So these are the reasons why they get into creating these kind of scams. Generally, it happens at the CEO, CXO. So these kind of levels where they are in a decision-making process, they get carried away, and these kinds of scams are created. It's very unfortunate, but it happens.
The next question we have is, Chapter 2, verse 54 to 62 defines Shita Prajna, an ideal person's irrespective of the context he is placed. Does it apply to the corporate leadership also?
It applies. See, as I was mentioning, as a rule or as a what to say, a law or even as a philosophy, it applies to individuals as well. It applies to corporate people as well. So there are a number of theories, there are a number of studies, but then what we need to understand is these managers are also human beings who are exposed to different kinds of behavioral changes. So in letter and spirit, everything applies. But then as an individual, how do you act in that particular? Now, as I was explaining Volkswagen case, now it is such an old company known for their quality, known for their responsible behavior in all these years. And somebody did this in the year 2015. And also it may not depend on one person. Like there are so many people involved. Who is influencing who is actually the culprit? So that also.
Yes, ma'am. The next question is there any work that has been done on trusteeship and its impact on profit maximization?
See, there are a lot of research studies which have focused on this trusteeship model of governance. In a few decades ago, if you see, it was very prominent in Indian society or everywhere for that matter, that if you are doing a lot of money in the business, it was indirectly understood that, okay, there is something going on. Not everything is right. How is it possible to do so much money by doing ethical business? So that kind of a notion was there before. But today, if you see, there are hundreds of examples where you can be completely ethical. You can do completely a responsible business by following rules and regulations. You can adopt total trusteeship model and yet be successful. So there are various kinds of studies which support this argument that corporate performance and trusteeship model of governance go hand in hand. Because there you're only asking managers to treat it as a trust. You're not asking them to run it as an NGO. You're saying them that you keep the business principles alive, but then you just treat it as a trustee and take up your fiduciary duty. That's the only difference.
Due to shortage of time, we'll take next two questions, ma'am.
Sure.
21st century, Raksha, Vriddhi, Palana, and Yogakshema, 4 pillars of corporate governance. CEOs of Indian companies are they following corporate governance pillars? Is a question that's been asked.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have not yet translated fully to the local model of governance. If you actually see principally, right, on paper, we still follow the Anglo-American model, which is basically a principal agent relationship. So there is a board, right? Board appoints, shareholders appoint board of directors and board of directors appoint managers. So that is the model that we are following. But then see, what we need to understand is, I keep telling this even to my students when I take these ethics classes. Transparency, disclosure, ethics, ethical behavior, all these things very sadly have been taught as virtues, right? So people say that, okay, he is very honest or she is very honest as a virtue. But then what need to be propagated or what we need to tell these youngsters who are going to be managers in the future is, unless you are ethical, right? Unless you are morally up to the principles of the business, at some point of time, you're going to get caught, right? So these easy shortcuts that you take may give you results for some time. Now, when all these top CEOs that you see who failed, who are paying millions of dollars of fines, who are in jail, who are arrested, who are barred from taking corporate positions, now all of them are brilliant people, right? So at some point of time, they thought that nobody will catch me because I'm doing it very, very discreet. But that's how the nature of corporate scams are. At some point of time, you get caught. So that to a large extent, people have started understanding that doing these kind of things will not take them long, because today communication is very, very transparent. People come to know about things, they read a lot, they know what is the impact of creating such kind of scams, and generally the consciousness is good in today's leadership, you see. So in my honest opinion, more than considering themselves as, okay, we are a kind of people or whatever, they also want to run their business in the long run in an honest manner. So that will also drive them to follow these principles, because in the long run that is needed.
We'll take the last question, ma'am. In the past, the country was run by emperors and kings by the context of dharma in every act and transaction. Why can't we include concept of dharma and we rely on spiritual concepts that strengthen in corporate governance?
Yeah, so actually when you see the concept of this trusteeship, right, that's what it includes. But one thing in the beginning itself, I mentioned that the difference between governing a state and the difference between corporate governance is that there is the concept of profit. Where in case of running the society, there is a concept of running a society with justice, equality, law and order, everything, right? So there is a slight difference between the two, because profit comes into picture when we talk about corporate governance. But as I mentioned, today there are hundreds and thousands of examples where people are doing everything according to rules and regulations, 100% ethically oriented business, but still they are making a lot of profits. Now, take for example, as I was mentioning, Compassionate Capitalism by Narayan Murthy. Now, if we read or if we listen, the kind of hardships he has to go through while putting the company Infosys, today he proudly says that I did not do anything out of law to create this huge organization like Infosys. So that itself shows that he followed all of them and he still created this huge company which is standing tall even today. So it is quite possible and it is happening.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions in the questionnaire box, but due to shortage of time, we've just taken a few. Thank you very much for such a wonderful session, what we had, taking through from the journey of what corporate governance is and how we can navigate through the Bharatiya management concept. Thank you very much for your valuable session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the opportunity. Sudhakar sir, thank you so much. I see you on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you. It was wonderful. Interestingly, I met Dr. Murli this morning, and Murlidhar of Kolar.
Okay, sir. Yeah, he was my teacher. Yes.
Yeah. So it was wonderful. Your lecture was wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.